Hello again everybody, Chris VanMeter here with another Versus video. For you I have this really awesome deck. It leads to a lot of interactive Magic games, millions and millions of choices for you and your opponent to make. Let's take a look at it. It's called Bant Hexproof. So we've got the normal Bant Hexproof deck that was pretty popular before M14 was printed. And M14 has given us a couple cards that I think is going to push the deck back into popularity, at least until Innistrad and M13 rotate out coming up here in the fall. So of the new cards, we have Gladecover Scout and Witch Stalker. Now Scout isn't a new card, it is a reprint, but this not so slippery Bogle is still good in Standard, just as it is in Modern, in the enchantment deck in Modern. So it's just a 1/1 hexproof guy for a green mana. You put all your enchantments on it, opponents can't stop you. Just leads to fun interactive Magic, but it is an extremely powerful effect. Now, Witch Stalker is the other new creature that we get to add to the deck. It's a 3/3 for 1 and 2 green, and it has hexproof. And it also gets a +1/+1 counter anytime one of your opponents casts a blue or a black spell on your turn. Honestly, I don't think that part of this card is going to be very relevant in the new format, but just being a 3/3 hexproof for 3 mana is going to be extremely relevant since we have all these powerful enchantments to put on it. We still have Geist of St. Traft and Invisible Stalker. Just like all the previous Bant Hexproof decks have had, they allow you to just continue to push damage through on your opponents. Really nothing more you can say about them. And then we also have Avacyn's Pilgrim still. It's the only non-hexproof creature in the deck, but since we're wanting to have an untapped green source on turn 1 for our Gladecover Scout, I figured we might as well play Avacyn's Pilgrim so that it will allow us to play Geist of St. Traft or a Witch Stalker on turn 2. Which could be potentially game-winning in itself because of our enchantments. Now speaking of those enchantments, we still have the same 16 that have been getting played for quite some time. Ethereal Armor, Rancor, Spectral Flight, and Unflinching Courage. They all allow us to make our 1/1s for 1, just giant monsters that our opponents either can't block or can't block profitably, and they just do tons and tons of damage and gain us life at the same time. So it's just very straightforward. We're going to play a creature that it's almost impossible for our opponents to deal with, suit them up with an enchantment, and then just do a bunch of damage to them really quick, hopefully before they even know what's going on. Now we do have a couple slots left after we have our creatures and our enchantments with our Simic Charms, and I actually like to play Simic Charm in this type of deck, especially now that we have the additional hexproof creatures. So before, when we only had just 8 hexproof creatures, you could get punished a bit by being greedy with your Simic Charms on your non-hexproof creatures. So like Fencing Ace used to be played, Silverblade Paladin used to be played. Both of those creatures with double strike are very appetizing targets for our Simic Charms. But if our opponent happens to have a removal spell, it can just really blow us out. And now we can just have 15 hexproof creatures. We can just Simic Charm for the giant growth, and they just never have an opportunity to stop us. But then we also get the backside of it with an unsummon if we need to bounce something. And then sometimes we can even give all of our permanents hexproof to save our Unflinching Courage from like a Ray of Revelation or an Abrupt Decay. I do have 23 lands. Most of these decks only play 22, but I am always a proponent for consistency, and I usually like to play one more land than most other people like to play. I also, because of Witch Stalker, I want to be able to cast it on turn 3 every time I have it, so having the 23rd land is very important for me. I'm also playing 3 basic forests along with my 8 green producing shock lands to give me 11 untapped green sources on turn 1, because I want to be able to play a Gladecover Scout or an Avacyn's Pilgrim every time I have it in my opening hand, and so having 11 gives us a great shot of that. I usually like to play 12 for decks like this when I have 8, but since I only have 7, I think trimming it down to 11 is going to be fine. And then just an assorted group of dual lands there so that we can play all of our spells. I do want to talk about one aspect of this deck, is that a lot of people are usually going to be in one or two camps. So either you really enjoy playing a deck like this because you enjoy playing powerful spells that limit the interaction from your opponent, and then the other camp is the people that just hate these types of decks. So a lot of people really like the interactive decks that give you lots of choices, give your opponents lots of choices, gives you chances to outplay your opponent. A lot of people find that a little bit more fun. But there is something to be said about just killing your opponent on turn 4 and they have nothing that they can do about it. And I am in the camp that enjoys doing that. So I'm going to have a lot of fun playing this deck. And let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboard and see what options we have there. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and take a look at the sideboard here of my Bant Hexproof deck. So we have 2 Advent of the Worm and 3 Rootborn Defenses, which are the cards that we're wanting to bring in against the control decks with Supreme Verdict. So really, the only way any of the control decks have a way to get a leg up on us, since all of our creatures are hexproof, is with Supreme Verdict. So Rootborn Defenses lets us combat Supreme Verdict, and Advent of the Worm lets us combat Terminus. So a lot of the control decks with the sweeper effects in them have both, Supreme Verdict and or Terminus. These are great cards against those types of decks. In addition to Voice of Resurgence, also playing a very similar role against those types of decks. So as long as we're still able to present a threat when they attempt to or successfully wipe our board, then we're going to be able to continue to put pressure on those control decks. Now, Spell Rupture is a card that I like to play against the Thragtusk decks with these types of decks. So really, the only way that we lose to the Thragtusk decks is if they happen to, stabilize with an early Thragtusk, or we stumble, and then just continually gain life with Thragtusk, either by chaining them or bouncing them with Restoration Angel. And so a lot of times, if we can just stop one Thragtusk from gaining them some life, then we'll be able to just continually push our advantage with all the pressure that we have, especially now that we even have 15 hexproof creatures instead of just the 8 that we used to play before. For Detention Sphere, I definitely like it just as like a catch-all against some troublesome cards. Tristani is definitely a real card. When I was playing the Junk Reanimator deck, the main way that I would actually beat the hexproof decks post-board is Tristani into Thragtusk and then blinking it, or Tristani into just chaining creatures. So Detention Sphere is definitely gonna do some work against anybody with Tristani, as well as we can use it against like the Boros Reckoner decks, or decks that will have creatures that will be able to block our Glade Cover Scout. So the downside for our new hexproof creatures is that they are blockable. Invisible Stalker is not blockable. Geist of St. Traft is going to be doing damage even if it happens to be blocked. But the two new creatures are definitely going to be blockable 100% of the time. Well, not 100%. We do have Spectral Flight, which is awesome. But they are blockable. Detention Sphere is going to allow us to continue to push damage through even if they have a blocker. And then Scavenging Ooze is just a card that I want to play in this deck. Just another way to push an advantage against the Imperial Rights decks. We're generally fairly good against them, but Scavenging Ooze is going to allow us to continue to push that advantage. Plus, I feel like it has the potential to be a decent card against decks that just have lots of removal for us. So there's a new white instant that makes us sacrifice an attacking creature. There's still Liliana. So against decks that will actually be able to handle our creatures, Scavenging Ooze has the potential to be a very huge threat against them. And I'm definitely excited to try it out and see how it does in this deck. So that's the sideboard for us. I'm definitely excited to play this deck. We're going to be playing against BBD. The last time we battled, he just beat the crud out of me, so I'm hoping to exact some vengeance here in the most non-interactive way possible with Bant Hexproof. But let's go ahead and jump into the games and see what we can do.